Hell's Divers, Defiance Beyond the Grave, reaches its zenith as Lieutenant Kane faces an impossible choice: flee with survivors or remain behind to manually redirect Tower Gamma's catastrophic reactor explosion skyward. Embracing the human ethos he once scorned, Kane chooses sacrifice, channeling the blast upward in a pillar of light that saves thousands, his defiance echoing eternally among the stars. The USS Valor hung in orbit above Aegis 9 like a sword of judgment, its massive hull blocking out the distant sun, as Lieutenant Marlowe Kane stood at the observation deck, watching the war-torn planet rotate beneath them. Scars of orbital bombardment marked the surface like festering wounds, dark against the ruddy brown of the scorched plains. Marlowe's reflection stared back at him from the transparent alloy. Tall, angular features typical of his Celtian heritage. Silver-flecked skin that caught the starlight. "Planning your acceptance speech already, Lieutenant?" The voice came from behind him, human and female. Marlowe turned to face Captain Evangeline Cruz, commander of the Hell's Divers. She was shorter than him by at least a head, with dark hair pulled back in a tight regulation braid. Her brown skin marked with a latticework of scars that told stories of past drops more eloquently than any metal. Humans wore their damage differently than Celtians. They displayed it, even seemed to take pride in it. "Just contemplating the variables, Captain," Marlowe responded, his voice deliberately neutral. "There are many ways to die down there." Cruz's mouth quirked into what humans called a smile, though Marlowe had learned it rarely indicated humor. "Dying's not in the mission parameters, Lieutenant. I've reviewed your service record. 3 campaigns, all successes. The Coalition speaks highly of your tactical assessments." "And yet they've assigned us to work with your Hell's Divers," Marlowe said, the human term feeling strange in his mouth. "Not assigned, requested." Cruz stepped closer to the viewport. "Your people respect efficiency, Lieutenant Kane. That's what we provide. Minimal resources, maximum impact." Marlowe felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the memory of past losses rising unbidden. Like on Viridian Prime, the words escaped before he could stop them. Cruz's expression hardened. "We both lost people there." "Yes, but we lost twice as many because your team deviated from the plan. And saved 10 times as many civilians because of it." She turned fully toward him now. "This isn't going to work if you're still fighting old battles, Lieutenant." Marlowe straightened, meeting her gaze. "My loyalty is to my mission and my people. Captain, I will execute my duties as required." "Good," she said, then added more softly, "because there are 100,000 civilians down there counting on us both." She left him at the viewport, boots echoing on the deck plating. Marlowe turned back to the planet below, tracing the outline of the primary target with his eyes. The plasma relay towers were visible even from orbit, 3 massive structures that controlled the planetary defense grid. As long as they remained in Regulan hands, no large-scale evacuation could proceed. The chime of his comm unit interrupted his thoughts. "Lieutenant Kane to Briefing Room Alpha. Tactical assessment in 10 minutes. Marlowe took one last look at the scarred world below. Somewhere down there, everything would change. He could feel it in his bones, a premonition his people were known for. He just couldn't tell if the change would be victory or annihilation. The briefing room hummed with tension when Marlowe arrived. Representatives from each of the Coalition species were present, arrayed around a holographic display of Aegis 9's surface. At the far end stood Major Ratek, the Regulan liaison, his crest of rigid bone plates flexing with barely concealed agitation. "Lieutenant Kane," the Major acknowledged with the barest inclination of his head. "Perhaps now we can proceed." Captain Cruz stood beside Dr. Simon Tarek, the Coalition's chief xenopsychologist. The human scientist was bent over a datapad, his spectacles, an affectation, since corrective procedures had been standard for centuries, sliding down his nose. Unlike Cruz, He looked unblemished, untouched by combat. Dr. Tarek will be accompanying the Hell's Divers as an observer, Cruz announced, causing a ripple of surprise through the assembly. A non-combatant? Marlowe questioned. The risk is unacceptable. I assure you, Lieutenant. I have undergone the necessary combat training, Tarek replied, looking up from his pad. My primary role is to study the psychological impact of integrated operations on coalition forces. Study us while we fight? Ratek's voice carried the distinctive metallic undertone of his species. Are we laboratory specimens now? More like pioneers, Tarek replied evenly. This coalition is unprecedented in galactic history. Multiple species fighting as one against a common enemy. That merits documentation. Before the tension could escalate further, the room darkened and the holographic display expanded to fill the center space. Admiral Varga, the coalition commander, appeared at the head of the table. Operation Gatebreaker, the admiral began without preamble. Our objective is simple, but crucial. Seize control of the 3 plasma relay towers that form the backbone of the Regulan defense grid on Aegis 9. Once these towers are neutralized, our fleet can establish a corridor for civilian evacuation. The hologram shifted to display 3 towering structures, each situated at points of a rough triangle across the planet's primary continent. Tower Alpha controls atmospheric defenses. Tower Beta manages ground-to-orbit communications. Tower Gamma houses the primary reactor that powers the entire grid. Current intelligence suggests minimal ground forces at Alpha and Beta, with the bulk of enemy resistance concentrated at Gamma, continued the Admiral. The original plan called for simultaneous assaults on all 3 objectives. Major Ratek stepped forward. I have prepared a detailed operation involving 3 battle groups, each containing elements from all coalition species. We would approach from different vectors, establish secure landing zones, and advance methodically toward each objective. The hologram shifted again, displaying a complex series of movements with estimated timeframes of 36 hours for completion. Marlowe nodded approvingly. It was thorough, cautious, and minimized unnecessary risk. With respect, Major, Cruz interrupted. That timeline is unacceptable. She gestured, and the hologram changed again. The Hell's Divers propose a direct approach. 3 drops, straight onto each objective. No landing zones, no slow advance. We hit hard, fast, and vertical. Murmurs spread around the room. Orbital drops were considered high risk even among hardened veterans, with survival rates that made commanders hesitate. And your estimated timeline? The Admiral asked. 6 hours, start to finish. Major Ratek's crest flared in agitation. Completely irresponsible. You would sacrifice precision and security for speed. Those towers are killing civilians every hour they remain operational, Cruz countered. Each day we delay costs thousands of lives. And a failed operation costs all of them, Ratek shot back. The Admiral raised a hand for silence. I understand both perspectives, but the Council has reviewed both plans and reached a compromise. The hologram shifted once more. The Hell's Divers will execute a Pathfinder mission. 1 team, dropping on Tower Alpha. If successful, they will create a beachhead for the main coalition forces to follow. Marlowe felt his heart sink. A Pathfinder mission was almost certainly a death sentence. Lieutenant Kane, the Admiral continued, your unit will accompany the Hell's Divers. Your experience with Regulan defensive systems will be crucial to their success. Admiral, Marlowe began, my team is not trained for orbital drops. We would be a liability. Your team has the highest adaptability rating in the coalition forces, Dr. Tarek interjected. According to my assessments, they're the optimal choice for integration with human drop tactics. Marlowe shot the scientist a cold glare, which Tarek met with unflinching calm. It's decided, the Admiral stated. Captain Cruz will command the operation. Lieutenant Kane will serve as her executive officer. Prepare your teams for drop in 6 hours. The hologram flickered out, leaving the room in momentary darkness. As the lights came up, Marlowe found Captain Cruz standing beside him. "I know you think we're reckless," she said quietly. "But ask yourself this. Can you trust us to save your people down there?" Before he could answer, she walked away, leaving him with the unsettling realization that for all his misgivings, he had no better alternative to offer. The dropship bay was a study in controlled chaos. 12 sleek assault craft lined the launch rails, their matte black hulls absorbing the harsh overhead lighting. Human technicians swarmed over each vessel, making final adjustments to systems that would soon be pushed beyond their design tolerances. Marlowe watched as his team of 20 Keltian special operators intermingled with the 36 human Hellsdivers. The contrast was stark. His people moved with deliberate precision, checking and rechecking their equipment with methodical care. The humans, by comparison, seemed almost casual, laughing and joking as they prepared for what might be their final mission. "Different methods. Same goal," Captain Cruz said, appearing at his side. She was clad in the distinctive armor of the Hellsdivers, matte black with crimson highlights at the joints, more streamlined than the bulkier Keltian combat suits. "Your people seem unconcerned," Marlowe observed. "Not unconcerned. Accepting." Cruz gestured toward a group of humans passing around what appeared to be a flask. "Death isn't something we fear, Lieutenant. It's something we embrace as a possibility. Makes the living more intense." "Is that why you call yourselves Hellsdivers? An affinity for death?" Cruz's laugh was sharp and genuine. "Hell is an old human concept, a place of punishment and fire. We dive into it willingly. It's meant to intimidate the enemy, not glorify our own demise." Before Marlowe could respond, the ship-wide announcement system activated. "All personnel, prepare for final drop countdown, T-minus 30 minutes. "Time to brief the combined team," Cruz said, heading toward the center of the bay, where both human and Keltian soldiers were gathering. She climbed atop a cargo container, instantly commanding the attention of all present. "Listen up. By now, you all know the mission parameters. We drop directly onto Tower Alpha, secure the control center, and establish a foothold for the main assault force. Simple in theory." The holographic display activated, showing a detailed schematic of their target. Tower defenses include automated turret systems, energy shields, and approximately 1 company of Regulan ground forces. Our drop will be targeted to exploit a blind spot in their sensor array, but we'll have about 30 seconds of freefall before they can track and target us. A human sergeant stepped forward. "That's a lot of firepower to punch through, Captain." "Which is why we're bringing our own." Cruz nodded toward the heavy weapons specialists. "Once we breach the outer defenses, we'll split into 3 teams. Alpha Team secures the control center. Beta Team establishes a perimeter. Gamma Team prepares the tower's defensive systems to repel counterattacks." She looked directly at Marlowe. "Lieutenant Kane will lead Alpha Team. His expertise with Regulan systems gives us our best chance of success." Marlowe nodded, both surprised and unsettled by the level of trust being placed in him. The plan was still reckless by Keltian standards, but he couldn't deny the efficiency of its design. "One final note," Cruz continued. "Intelligence reports indicate civilian hostages are being held in the tower's lower levels. A secondary objective will be to locate and extract these hostages if possible." Marlowe frowned. "That wasn't in the mission parameters." "It is now," Cruz replied without hesitation. "We don't leave innocents behind. Any questions?" There were none. The combined team dispersed to their assigned dropships, a new tension evident in their movements. Marlowe followed Cruz toward the lead vessel. "You should have consulted me about the hostage extraction," he said, once they were out of earshot of the others. "Would you have objected?" she asked, checking her weapon systems with practiced efficiency. "No," Marlowe admitted after a moment. "But proper protocol sometimes gets people killed," Cruz finished for him. "I've read your file too. Lieutenant, Viridian Prime wasn't your first loss. You've had a team under your command die before. On Saris 4. Following protocol didn't save them. Marlowe felt a cold anger rise within him. You overstep, Captain. Maybe, she conceded, facing him directly. But in less than 30 minutes, we're going to be dropping into hell together. I need to know if your need for protocol is going to get my people killed. The ship's announcement cut through the tension. All personnel, board dropships. T-minus 15 minutes to launch. We'll continue this discussion on the ground, Marlowe said stiffly, turning toward their assigned craft. If we make it, Cruz added. And Marlowe couldn't tell if it was humor or fatalism that colored her words. The interior of the dropship was utilitarian to the extreme. 2 rows of crash seats facing each other, overhead rails for stability during turbulence, and a cockpit separated from the main compartment by a pressure door. The smell of metal, lubricant, and the distinctive ozone tang of energy weapons filled the confined space. Marlowe secured himself in a seat beside Dr. Tarek, who was adjusting a series of small recording devices embedded in his armor. Fascinating, the scientist murmured, observing the interactions between human and Keltian soldiers. Even facing imminent danger, the cultural differences in stress response are remarkably consistent. Is that all we are to you? Data points? Marlowe asked, unable to keep the edge from his voice. Tarek looked up, seemingly surprised by the question. On the contrary, Lieutenant, you're the future. This mission, this moment of cooperation between our species, could reshape galactic politics for generations to come. If we survive. Survival is merely one variable, Tarek replied, his tone oddly reassuring despite the clinical words. The choice to fight together has already changed everything. The dropship's engines began their distinctive whine as the pre-launch sequence initiated. Captain Cruz moved through the compartment, checking harnesses and offering brief words of encouragement to each soldier, human and Keltian alike. Divers and guests, the pilot's voice came over the intercom, a forced levity in his tone. Welcome aboard Flight 666 to Hell. Please ensure your harnesses are secure, your weapons are locked, and your wills are updated. Estimated drop time is 7 minutes. Enjoy the ride. A chorus of dark laughter came from the human soldiers, while the Keltians remained stoically silent. Cruz took her seat across from Marlowe, just as the dropship disengaged from its docking clamps. Ever done a combat drop before, Lieutenant? Marlowe shook his head. Keltian doctrine favors conventional insertions. Well, first piece of advice, don't eat beforehand. Second piece, when we hit atmosphere, don't fight the G-forces. Let your body go loose. Is there a third piece of advice? Marlowe asked, feeling the ship begin to accelerate away from the Valor. Cruz's smile was grim. Pray to whatever gods you believe in. Sometimes they listen. The ship lurched suddenly as it entered formation with the other 11 dropships. Through a small viewport, Marlowe could see them arranged in a tight arrowhead pattern, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. Final approach to drop vector, the pilot announced. Stealth systems engaged. Weapons hot. Prepare for atmospheric entry in 60 seconds. The tension in the compartment was palpable now, a physical presence as real as the soldiers themselves. Marlowe found himself unconsciously checking his harness, his weapon, his emergency systems, a ritual of preparation that did little to calm his growing apprehension. 30 seconds to entry, the pilot called. May the gods pity those below, because we sure as hell won't. Another chorus of grim laughter from the humans. One of them began a low, rhythmic chant that was quickly taken up by the others. Through fire and blood, through death and pain, Hell's divers ride again. And then they hit the atmosphere, and all other sounds were drowned out by the howling inferno that engulfed the dropship. The descent was violence given form. Metal screamed as atmospheric friction threatened to tear the dropship apart. The internal temperature rose sharply, despite the environmental systems working at maximum capacity. Sweat beaded on Marlowe's silver-flecked skin, instantly evaporating in the superheated air. The ship bucked and rolled as the pilot fought to maintain their approach vector. Marlowe felt his consciousness beginning to fade as G-forces mounted, the blood being pulled from his brain despite his combat suit's pressure systems. Through the haze of near blackout, he was dimly aware of Captain Cruz watching him from across the compartment, her expression unreadable behind her helmet visor. She reached out, grasping his forearm in a gesture that transcended species, a warrior's acknowledgement of shared danger. "Stay with us, Lieutenant." Her voice came through his helmet comm, steady despite the chaos around them. Worst part's almost over. As if on cue, the violent shaking subsided, replaced by an eerie stillness as the dropship transitioned to its final approach vector. The brief moment of relief was shattered by the pilot's urgent announcement. "Enemy targeting systems active, evasive maneuvers." The dropship banked hard to starboard, throwing everyone against their restraints. Through the viewport, Marlowe saw the distinctive flash of anti-aircraft fire rising from the surface, followed by a blinding explosion as one of the trailing dropships was hit directly. "Dropship 7 is down," the pilot reported, his voice clinically detached. "No survivors expected." Cruz's grip on Marlowe's arm tightened momentarily, then released. "Focus on the mission," she said, though whether to him or herself was unclear. The remaining dropships scattered, breaking their tight formation to present more difficult targets. Marlowe's tactical training instantly recognized the vulnerability this created. Dispersed forces were easier to pick off individually. "We need to regroup," he began, but Cruz was already ahead of him. "All units, maintain current vectors but converge on drop zone," she ordered through the command channel. "Use buildings for cover on final approach. Prepare for hot insertion." The surface of Aegis 9 was rapidly approaching, the details of Tower Alpha becoming visible through the viewport. The massive structure rose like a spear from the scorched plains, surrounded by smaller auxiliary buildings and defense emplacements. Flashes of anti-aircraft fire created a deadly lattice around the tower's upper sections. 2 minutes to touchdown," the pilot announced, deploying countermeasures. A series of bright flares erupted from the dropship's hull, temporarily blinding the enemy targeting systems. The momentary respite was enough for the pilot to dive beneath the effective range of the tower's main defenses, skimming dangerously close to the surface. "All teams, prepare for immediate deployment," Cruz ordered. "Drop sequence initiates on my mark." Marlowe felt a surge of adrenaline as the rear hatch of the dropship began to lower, revealing the blur of the ground rushing beneath them. The smell of burnt atmosphere and weapon discharge flooded the compartment. "Remember your training," he called to his Keltian soldiers. "Form up on me once we're groundside." Cruz gave a final nod to Marlowe before standing, gripping the overhead rail with practiced ease, despite the ship's erratic movements. "Hell's divers," she called, her voice carrying over the roar of wind and engines. "Time to earn our name." And with that, she leapt from the open hatch, her form quickly swallowed by the swirling dust below. One by one, the human soldiers followed her, each disappearing into the maelstrom without hesitation. Marlowe stood, finding his balance against the pitching deck. He looked back at his team, seeing both determination and uncertainty in their eyes. "For the coalition," he said simply, then turned and jumped into the unknown. The impact came sooner than expected, Marlowe's descent slowed by the atmospheric thrusters in his combat suit. He hit the ground in a controlled roll, his weapon already coming up to scan for threats. Around him, both human and Keltian soldiers were landing in a rough perimeter, each taking up defensive positions with practiced efficiency. Tower Alpha loomed above them, its massive bulk blocking out the sky. At ground level, the structure was even more imposing, a titanic monolith of dark metal and pulsing energy conduits. The base was surrounded by a complex of smaller buildings, many showing damage from previous coalition bombing runs. "Rally point secure," Cruz's voice came through the comm. "All units report." Marlowe did a quick head count of his team. Keltian squad present and accounted for. No injuries. Similar reports came in from the other dropships. Of the 12 that had launched, 9 had made it to the surface. Over 300 soldiers, the largest combined human-Keltian force ever to conduct a ground operation together. "Defensive perimeter established," reported one of the human sergeants. "Enemy response incoming from the north and east quadrants." "As expected," Cruz replied. "Lieutenant Kane, your assessment?" Marlowe scanned the tower's base, his enhanced vision picking out details others might miss. "Main entrance is heavily fortified. Security protocols will make a frontal assault costly." "Alternatives?" He indicated a series of maintenance hatches near the tower's foundation. "Service access points. Less defended, but likely to trigger internal alarms." Cruz considered for only a moment. "We split the force. Main group creates a diversion at the primary entrance. Strike team uses the maintenance access to infiltrate and secure the control center." "My team can lead the strike force," Marlowe offered. "We have experience with Regulan security systems." "Agreed. Take half your Keltians and I'll assign you 12 of my divers. Dr. Tarek goes with you." Marlowe frowned. "The scientist will slow us down." "The scientist needs to observe both aspects of the operation," Tarek interjected, adjusting his recording equipment. "And I assure you, Lieutenant, I can keep up." Before Marlowe could object further, the distinctive whine of Regulan hover tanks became audible from beyond the perimeter. "Enemy armor approaching," called one of the lookouts. 2 minutes out." "Decision time's over," Cruz said firmly. "Execute the plan. We'll draw their attention to the main entrance and punch through if possible. Your team moves on my signal." Marlowe nodded, quickly selecting the members of his strike team and briefing them on the infiltration route. The chosen soldiers, a mix of his best Keltians and a dozen grim-faced Hellsdivers, gathered around him as he displayed a schematic of the tower's interior. "Once inside, we move directly to the central lift shaft," he explained. "The control center is located on level 50. Expect heavy resistance on approach." "What about the hostages?" asked one of the human soldiers, a stocky woman whose armor bore more battle scars than the others. "Secondary objective," Marlowe replied. "Intelligence places them on the lower levels. We'll address that concern after the primary objective is secured." The woman's expression hardened behind her visor, but she offered no further comment. "All units, prepare to engage." Cruz's voice came through the comm. "Diversion team moving in 30 seconds." Marlowe led his strike force toward the maintenance access point, using the surrounding buildings for cover. Behind them, the main force began a coordinated advance on the tower's primary entrance, drawing immediate fire from the defensive emplacements. The sound of battle erupted with stunning ferocity. Energy weapons, explosive ordnance, and the distinctive high-pitched whine of Regulan sonic cannons created a cacophony that echoed across the scorched plains. "Strike team in position," Marlowe reported as they reached the maintenance hatch. One of his Keltian specialists immediately began working on the security lock, his fingers moving with practiced precision across the alien interface. "Diversion is working," Cruz responded, her voice tight with exertion. "Enemy forces fully committed to the main entrance. You have maybe 5 minutes before they realize it's a feint." The hatch opened with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a dimly lit service tunnel beyond. Marlowe took point, leading his team into the tower's infrastructure. The passage was cramped, forcing the larger Keltians to hunch uncomfortably as they advanced. "Maintain calm discipline from this point," Marlowe ordered. "Hand signals only, unless absolutely necessary." They moved through the service tunnels in silent efficiency, guided by Marlowe's memorized schematics of the tower's layout. The distant sounds of battle grew fainter as they penetrated deeper into the structure, eventually reaching a junction that opened onto a main corridor. Marlowe raised a closed fist, the universal signal to halt, and peered carefully around the corner. The corridor was empty, but security sensors would certainly detect them once they left the maintenance tunnels. He turned to the team and outlined their next move with quick hand gestures. They would proceed to the central lift shaft and ascend to the control level. Speed would be their ally once they were detected. The human soldiers nodded understanding. But Marlowe noted the same stocky woman from earlier, gesturing toward a side passage that led downward, toward the levels where the hostages were reportedly held. Marlowe shook his head firmly. Primary objective first. The woman's jaw tightened, but she fell back into position. With a final check of his weapon, Marlowe led the team into the main corridor. They had advanced less than 20 meters when the alarm klaxons began to wail, the lighting shifting to a pulsing red emergency mode. "So much for the element of surprise," muttered one of the humans. "Advance pattern Delta," Marlowe ordered, and the team seamlessly shifted into a leapfrog formation, alternating units, providing cover fire as they moved forward. They encountered the first resistance at the entrance to the central shaft, a squad of Regulan soldiers in heavy combat armor. The ensuing firefight was brief, but intense. Energy weapons scorching the metallic walls as both sides sought advantageous positions. Marlowe ducked behind a structural pillar as energy bolts sizzled past his position. He signaled to two of his Keltians, who immediately deployed smoke canisters to obscure the enemy's line of sight. Using the momentary confusion, the Hell's Divers executed a flanking maneuver with practiced precision, catching the Regulans in a devastating crossfire. When the smoke cleared, the enemy squad lay neutralized, and Marlowe's team had suffered only minor injuries. They secured the central shaft, finding the main lift systems locked down as expected. "We climb," Marlowe decided, indicating the maintenance ladders that ran the height of the shaft. 50 levels. Pace yourselves." As they began their ascent, Marlowe activated his comm unit. "Strike team proceeding to objective. Encountering moderate resistance. Status of diversion force?" Cruz's response came through broken and distorted. "Holding. Main entrance. Heavy casualties. Unexpected reinforcements." The transmission cut out, replaced by static. Marlowe tried several times to re-establish contact, without success. "The tower structure is interfering with communications," Dr. Tarek observed, surprisingly steady despite the exertion of the climb. "We're effectively on our own until we reach the control center." "Then we stick to the plan," Marlowe replied, continuing upward. "Primary objective remains unchanged." They climbed in silence after that, conserving energy for the task ahead. Marlowe found himself impressed by the endurance of the human soldiers, who showed no signs of fatigue despite the punishing ascent. Even Tarek kept pace, though his breathing had become noticeably labored. Halfway up, they encountered a security checkpoint, a reinforced platform spanning the shaft with automated defense turrets. Marlowe signaled a halt as the team assessed the obstacle. "Those turrets will cut us to pieces if we try to climb past them," observed one of the Keltian soldiers. Marlowe studied the platform structure. "We need to disable the power conduit. See there?" He pointed to a glowing junction box on the underside of the platform. One precise shot could overload the system. "Allow me," said one of the Hell's Divers, a wiry human with a specialized marksman's rifle. He braced against the ladder, took careful aim, and fired a single shot. The junction box erupted in a shower of sparks, and the turrets immediately went dark. "Impressive," Marlowe acknowledged, genuinely surprised by the precision of the shot. The human shrugged. "That's why they call us divers. We go deep." They continued their ascent, encountering two more similar checkpoints that they dispatched with equal efficiency. As they neared the control level, Marlowe became aware of a growing sense of unease. The resistance had been lighter than anticipated, almost as if they were being allowed to reach their objective. "Hold position," he ordered when they reached the access hatch to level 50. "Something's wrong." "We can't stop now," one of the humans objected. "We're almost there." "It's too easy," Marlowe insisted. "This is the primary control center for the entire defense grid. It should be better protected." Dr. Tarek moved beside him on the ladder. "Perhaps the diversion was more effective than anticipated. The majority of forces could be engaged with Captain Cruz's team. Marlowe considered this possibility. It was logical. Yet the tactical assessment felt incomplete. Still, they had come too far to turn back. New approach, he decided. We split into two teams. Team 1 breaches the hatch and secures the immediate area. Team 2 follows 30 seconds later, as reinforcement. Dr. Tarek, you're with the second team. The scientist nodded acceptance of this role. Marlowe selected 6 soldiers, 3 Keltian, 3 human, for the first team, positioning them near the hatch. He himself would lead the second team, providing tactical oversight once the situation was assessed. Breach on my mark, he ordered, then counted down from 3 with his fingers. On 0, one of the Keltians forced the hatch open, and the first team surged through into the control level beyond. The sound of weapons fire was immediate and intense. Marlowe counted the seconds, tension building with each moment of combat that echoed through the open hatch. At the 30-second mark, he led the second team through, weapon ready. The scene that greeted them was one of calculated ambush. The first team was pinned down behind minimal cover, facing a full platoon of Regulan elite guards arranged in defensive positions throughout the control room. The space was vast, filled with monitoring stations and communication arrays, with the central control terminal positioned on a raised platform at the far end. Marlowe quickly assessed their options. None of them favorable. A frontal assault would be suicide, but retreat would mean mission failure. Covering fire, he ordered, and his team immediately laid down a barrage that allowed the pinned first team to fall back to better positions. Once consolidated, they had a moment to formulate a strategy. We need to reach that central terminal. Marlowe indicated the raised platform. Once we control that, we control the entire tower. There's no approach that doesn't leave us exposed, observed one of the Keltians. The stocky human woman who had earlier shown concern for the hostages spoke up. We could create a diversion. The ventilation system above the main floor would support one person. A well-placed explosive charge could disrupt their formation, enough for a main assault to push through. Marlowe studied the ceiling area she indicated. The plan had merit, though it would almost certainly be a one-way mission for whoever placed the charge. I'll go, the woman volunteered before he could respond. I'm the smallest and have demolition training. Marlowe hesitated, then nodded his approval. The rest of us will prepare for immediate assault on your signal. The woman, Sergeant Rivera, according to her armor identifier, removed her heavy weapons and equipment, keeping only a sidearm and the explosive charges. With remarkable agility, she accessed a maintenance panel in the ceiling and disappeared into the ventilation system. Be ready, Marlowe told the remaining team. When the charge detonates, we move as one unit directly toward the central platform. No hesitation, no stopping for wounded. Minutes passed with agonizing slowness, the exchange of suppressing fire continuing without pause. Marlowe found himself counting heartbeats, wondering if Rivera had been captured or killed in the ventilation system. Then, the explosion came, not from above the Regulan positions as planned, but from the far side of the control room, near a secondary entrance. The blast tore through a section of wall, creating a momentary distraction that caught the defenders completely off guard. Marlowe instantly recognized the opportunity. Advance, he ordered, and his team surged forward, using the confusion to push through the Regulan lines. The gambit worked. By the time the defenders reorganized, Marlowe's strike team had gained the central platform and established a defensive perimeter around the main control terminal. Dr. Tarek immediately began accessing the systems, his knowledge of Regulan technology proving surprisingly comprehensive. Sergeant Rivera, Marlowe called over the comm. Report status. There was no response. But moments later, the stocky human emerged from a side corridor, bleeding from a shoulder wound but very much alive. Change the plan, she explained breathlessly as she rejoined them. Found a secondary access route that provided better positioning for the charge. Effective improvisation, Marlowe acknowledged, finding himself impressed yet again by the human capacity for adaptive tactics. I have control of the system, Tarek announced, his fingers dancing across the alien interface. Deactivating Tower Alpha's defensive grid now. The effect was immediate. Throughout the control room, weapon emplacements powered down, and the lighting shifted from combat alert to standard operation. On the main display screen, a schematic of the surrounding airspace showed the defensive envelope collapsing. All units, this is Lieutenant Kane. Marlowe broadcast on the Coalition frequency. Tower Alpha secure. Defense grid offline, awaiting further orders. The response was not what he expected. Instead of Captain Cruz or Coalition Command, Major Rotek's voice came through the comm. Lieutenant Kane, the situation has changed. Captain Cruz's force is pinned down at the base of the tower, with heavy casualties. Enemy reinforcements are moving toward your position from Towers Beta and Gamma. Estimated time to arrival, 30 minutes. Marlowe felt a cold determination settle over him. Understood. We'll hold this position as long as possible. Request immediate evacuation for Captain Cruz's forces. Negative, Rotek replied. No evacuation is possible while the other towers remain active. Their defensive grids are compensating for Alpha's shutdown. Then we need to take down the other towers, Marlowe stated. The Council is recalling all remaining dropships. The operation is being reassessed. Marlowe exchanged glances with the human and Keltian soldiers around him. The implication was clear. They were being abandoned. With respect, Major, that's unacceptable, Marlowe said firmly. We have personnel on the ground. The mission can still succeed. The mission parameters have changed. Lieutenant, Rotek responded, his tone hardening. You are ordered to hold your position until a new strategy is formulated. Marlowe was about to argue further when Dr. Tarek interrupted, his voice oddly calm given the circumstances. Lieutenant, I've accessed the tower's internal security feeds. You need to see this. Marlowe moved to the scientist's side. Looking at the display, he indicated. It showed the lower levels of the tower, specifically a large holding area where dozens of civilians were being kept under guard. But it was the adjacent chamber that drew Marlowe's attention. There, clearly visible, was Captain Cruz, bloodied but defiant, surrounded by Regulan soldiers. She was captured during the diversion, Tarek explained, along with at least 30 of her divers. Sergeant Rivera pushed forward to see the display. We have to get them out, she said, her voice leaving no room for debate. Marlowe found himself torn between his duty to the mission and his growing respect for the human soldiers who had fought alongside him. By all standard protocols, holding the control center until reinforcements arrived was the correct course of action. But Cruz's earlier words echoed in his mind. Sometimes protocol gets people killed. Dr. Tarek, he said finally, can you maintain control of this system remotely? Tarek considered for a moment. Yes, with the right equipment. The portable interface in my kit should suffice. And can you access the systems for Towers Beta and Gamma from here? A smile slowly spread across the scientist's face as he grasped Marlowe's intention. Not directly, but I can create a backdoor vulnerability that would allow similar access once those control centers are reached. Do it, Marlowe ordered, then turned to address the combined team. New mission parameters. We're going to rescue our people. Then we're going to finish what we started. The Major ordered us to hold position, one of the Keltians pointed out. And I'm ordering us to complete our mission, Marlowe replied. Any objections can be noted in the official record, assuming we survive to file one. There were no further objections. Even his Keltian soldiers seemed to straighten with new resolve, affected by the same determination that radiated from their human counterparts. Prepare for room-by-room fighting, Marlowe continued. We'll make our way down to the detention level, free our people, then assess our options for the remaining towers. As the team readied for their new objective, Marlowe caught Sergeant Rivera watching him with an appraising look. Something on your mind, Sergeant? Just wondering what changed, she replied. You were all about protocol and primary objectives earlier. Marlowe considered her question seriously. Nothing changed. The primary objective has always been to secure all 3 towers. We're simply improvising the method. Rivera's scarred face broke into a grin. Now you're thinking like a diver, sir. They moved through the tower's levels with methodical efficiency, encountering pockets of resistance that they neutralized with minimal casualties. Dr. Tarek remained with them, his portable interface allowing him to disable security systems and lock down sections ahead of their advance. The detained civilians and captured divers were being held 20 levels below the control center. As they approached the detention area, Marlowe gathered the team for a final briefing. Based on the security feeds, we're facing approximately 20 guards in the main holding area, with another squad in the adjacent chamber where Captain Cruz is being held. We'll use a pincer approach. Team 1 creates a diversion at the main entrance, while Team 2 breaches through the service corridor and secures the hostages. I'll lead Team 2, Rivera volunteered. I've got the most extraction experience. Marlowe nodded. Approved. Dr. Tarek, you'll remain here with our wounded. Once we've secured the hostages, we'll need a clear exit route to the surface. I can do better than that, Tarek replied, his fingers working rapidly on his interface. I've located a transport bay 3 levels below us. Several Regulan shuttles are docked there, apparently undamaged. Can you access their systems? Already done. They'll respond to our command codes now. Marlowe felt a moment of genuine admiration for the scientist's capabilities. Well done, Doctor. That gives us an extraction option if needed. With the plan established, the teams moved into position. Marlowe led the diversion force to the main entrance of the detention area, while Rivera took her team through the service corridors to approach from the rear. In position, Rivera reported through the comm. Execute on my mark, Marlowe responded. 3, 2, 1, mark. The synchronized assault caught the Regulan guards completely unprepared. Marlowe's team breached the main entrance with a focused barrage that pinned down the defenders, while Rivera's squad entered from behind, quickly securing the civilian hostages and moving them toward the exit. Marlowe fought his way toward the chamber where Cruz was being held, aware that time was critical. If the enemy realized their leverage was being eliminated, they might decide to execute their high-value prisoner. He reached the chamber door just as an alarm began to sound throughout the level. With no time for subtlety, he placed a breaching charge on the lock mechanism and detonated it, blowing the door inward with explosive force. The scene inside was chaotic. Cruz had apparently been in the midst of her own escape attempt, having somehow freed herself from her restraints. 2 Regulan guards already lay incapacitated at her feet, while she grappled with a third. Marlowe eliminated the remaining guards with precise shots, then moved to Cruz's side. She was more severely injured than the security feed had shown, with a deep laceration across her torso and burns on her left arm. "Took your time, Lieutenant," she gasped, her voice strained but still carrying that edge of defiance. "Had to secure the control center first," he replied, supporting her weight as they moved toward the exit. "Protocol, you understand." A ghost of a smile crossed her bloodied face. "And yet here you are, breaking every rule in the Coalition handbook." I learned from an expert in reckless improvisation. Their banter was interrupted by Rivera's urgent report. "All hostages secured, but we've got a problem. Enemy reinforcements have cut off our route to the transport bay." Marlowe thought quickly. "Alternative exit through the maintenance shaft. We can access it from level 35. "Negative." Tarek's voice came through the comm. "Internal sensors show movement in all main shafts. They're systematically sealing the tower. Then we fight our way to the transports." Marlowe decided. "All units converge on my position. We move as a single force." They gathered quickly, the wounded supported by those still combat effective, civilian hostages in the center of their formation, protected on all sides. Cruz insisted on walking under her own power despite her injuries, setting an example of determination that seemed to inspire both soldiers and civilians alike. "What's the plan once we reach the transports?" she asked, as they began their descent toward the shuttle bay. "Dr. Tarek has created a backdoor into the defense grid," Marlowe explained. "If we can reach towers Beta and Gamma, we can bring down the entire system." Cruz's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That wasn't in the mission parameters." "Sometimes protocol gets people killed," Marlowe quoted back to her. The journey to the transport bay was a running battle, with Regulan forces harrying them at every turn. They lost 3 more soldiers and several civilians before reaching their destination, but the majority of the group remained intact. The shuttle bay was a vast chamber, housing a dozen Regulan transports of varying sizes. Tarek directed them toward the largest, a troop carrier with capacity for their entire group. "I've overridden the security protocols," he explained, as they boarded. "The vessel will recognize our commands, but I recommend having one of the Keltian pilots at the controls. The interface is similar to our own systems." Marlowe designated one of his team to pilot the craft, then joined Cruz in the command section as the engines powered up. "We're not out yet," Cruz cautioned, wincing as one of her soldiers treated her wounds. "They'll have air defenses active." "Already accounted for," Marlowe assured her. Tarek's work in the control center wasn't just about creating backdoors. He also rerouted Tower Alpha's identification protocols. "As far as the defense grid is concerned, we're a friendly vessel on authorized business." Cruz studied him with new appreciation. "You've been holding out on me, Lieutenant. There might be a future for you in the divers after all." The transport lifted smoothly from the bay, its engines humming with power as it ascended through the tower's central shaft toward the surface. True to Marlowe's prediction, the automated defenses remained dormant as they emerged into the open air above Tower Alpha. "Tower Beta is 17 kilometers east," Tarek reported, consulting his interface. "Tower Gamma is 30 kilometers south. Both are on high alert following our capture of Alpha." "Beta first," Marlowe decided. "It controls communications. If we can take it down, Gamma will be isolated." The transport banked eastward, accelerating to maximum atmospheric speed. Through the viewports, Marlowe could see the scorched landscape of Aegis 9 rushing beneath them, a blasted wasteland bearing the scars of prolonged conflict. "Lieutenant," one of the Keltian soldiers called from a sensor station, "we have incoming aircraft. 6 Regulan interceptors on an intercept course. Time to contact." 3 minutes. They're moving fast." Marlowe turned to Cruz. "Recommendations?" Despite her injuries, Cruz moved to the tactical display with purpose. "This transport has minimal defensive capabilities, but the terrain might work in our favor. See that ridgeline ahead? If we drop to surface level and follow the canyon, their sensors will have trouble tracking us." The Keltian pilot adjusted course immediately, bringing the transport into a steep descent that had the civilians clutching their seats in alarm. They skimmed the surface at dangerously low altitude, following the contours of a deep canyon that cut through the landscape like an ancient wound. "Interceptors are breaking off," reported the sensor operator. "They're circling the area but not pursuing into the canyon." "They'll wait at the exit point," Cruz predicted. "We need an alternative approach to Tower Beta." Marlowe studied the topographical display. There, he indicated a narrow tributary canyon that branched off to the east. "It doesn't lead all the way to the tower, but it gets us within 5 kilometers. From there, we could proceed on foot." "A ground assault with wounded and civilians?" Cruz looked skeptical. "Not an assault," Marlowe clarified. "An infiltration. We land the transport here." He indicated a sheltered ravine. "Leave a small team to guard the civilians, and send our most combat-effective personnel to take the tower." Cruz considered the plan. "It could work, but it's high risk. We'd be completely exposed during the approach." "Not completely," Dr. Tarek interjected, looking up from his interface. "I've been analyzing the sensor data from Tower Alpha. There's a network of maintenance tunnels connecting all three towers, subsurface conduits for power and data transmission. Access points? Marlowe asked immediately. According to the schematics, there should be an entrance within a kilometer of our proposed landing site. Cruz and Marlowe exchanged glances, a moment of unspoken communication passing between them. "It's decided then," Marlowe announced. "We land, locate the tunnel entrance, and proceed to Tower Beta via the subsurface route." The pilot guided the transport into the tributary canyon, following its winding course until they reached the sheltered ravine Marlowe had identified. The landing was rougher than ideal, but the transport settled onto the rocky surface without serious damage. "Organize into 2 teams," Marlowe ordered as they disembarked. "Strike team will consist of our remaining combat-effective personnel, 12 total, including Captain Cruz and myself." "Belay that," Cruz interrupted. "I'm combat effective." "You have 3 broken ribs and a partially collapsed lung," countered the medic who had treated her. "You need proper medical attention, not another firefight." For a moment, Cruz looked ready to argue, but then relented with visible frustration. "Fine. Lieutenant Kane has operational command, but I expect regular updates. And if you miss 2 consecutive check-ins, I'm coming after you with whatever forces I can muster." "Understood, Captain," Marlowe agreed, secretly relieved that he wouldn't have to worry about her condition during the mission. With the teams organized, Marlowe led the strike force away from the transport, following Tarek's directions toward the tunnel entrance. The scientist had insisted on accompanying them, citing the need for his technical expertise to access Tower Beta's systems. They found the entrance hidden beneath an outcropping of rock, a maintenance hatch secured with a standard Regulan cipher lock. One of the Keltian specialists made short work of it, and soon they were descending into the dimly lit tunnel beyond. The maintenance conduit was cramped but navigable, stretching ahead in a straight line toward their objective. Marlowe led the way, his enhanced vision penetrating the gloom more effectively than his human counterparts, who relied on tactical lights attached to their weapons. "How far to Tower Beta?" Sergeant Rivera asked, after they had been moving for nearly an hour. "Another 3 kilometers, Tarek replied, consulting his interface. "The tunnel should take us directly to a service level beneath the tower's main structure." They continued in silence after that, each lost in their own thoughts as they approached what might well be their final mission. Marlowe found himself reflecting on the strange path that had led him here, from skeptical observer to impromptu commander of a desperate operation, fighting alongside humans he would have dismissed as reckless only days before. The tunnel began to slope upward, and soon they encountered the first sign of their approach to Tower Beta, a security checkpoint with automated scanners. Tarek moved forward, his interface connecting wirelessly with the checkpoint systems. "I can spoof the sensors to read us as a maintenance crew," he explained, "but only for about 30 seconds. We'll need to move through quickly and in single file." One by one, they passed through the checkpoint, Tarek's technological deception holding just long enough for the last member of their team to clear the scanners. Beyond, the tunnel widened into a proper corridor, with proper lighting and marked access points. "We're inside the tower's maintenance level," Tarek confirmed. "The central shaft should be ahead, with access to all levels." "And the control center?" Marlowe asked. "Level 42, similar layout to Tower Alpha." Marlowe considered their options. "We can't risk a frontal assault this time. We need a more subtle approach." "I might have a solution," Tarek offered. "The backdoor I created in Alpha systems included a personnel database override. I can generate false credentials identifying us as high-level maintenance technicians, responding to a critical systems failure." "Will that get us all the way to the control center?" "Possibly not, but it should get us close." It was their best option. Marlowe had Tarek create the false credentials, while the rest of the team removed the more obvious military components of their gear, attempting to look more like technicians than soldiers. Their weapons couldn't be disguised, but at least they could be carried less conspicuously. "Remember," Marlowe cautioned as they prepared to ascend, We maintain the deception as long as possible. If challenged, let Dr. Tarek do the talking. Only engage if absolutely necessary. They moved upward through the tower's infrastructure, passing several Regulan work crews who barely glanced at them, accepting Tarek's credentials without question. Their progress was steady until they reached level 38, where they encountered a security checkpoint that couldn't be bypassed with maintenance credentials. "We need command authorization to proceed further," Tarek whispered after attempting to access the checkpoint. Marlowe assessed the situation. The checkpoint was manned by 4 Regulan guards, with automated defenses backing them up. A direct assault would almost certainly trigger tower-wide alarms. "Can you create a diversion in another part of the tower?" he asked Tarek. "Something that would draw security personnel away from this post?" The scientist thought for a moment, then nodded. "A simulated reactor breach in the lower levels would trigger automated protocols. Most security personnel would be required to respond." "Do it." Tarek worked quickly, his fingers dancing across his interface. Moments later, alarm klaxons began to sound throughout the tower, but with a different tone than the intruder alert they had heard in Tower Alpha. "Reactor containment breach, level 7, announced an automated voice in the Regulan language. "All security personnel implement Protocol 17 immediately." The effect was immediate. 3 of the 4 guards at the checkpoint received orders through their comms and rushed toward the lifts, leaving only a single sentry behind. "Now we move," Marlowe ordered. They approached the checkpoint with purposeful strides, Tarek in the lead with his credentials displayed prominently. The remaining guard gestured for them to halt, clearly suspicious of their timing. "Maintenance access required to level 42, Tarek stated firmly. "Critical systems failure imminent due to reactor instability." The guard hesitated, his training conflicting with the apparent urgency of the situation. That moment of indecision was all the opening Marlowe needed. He moved with practiced speed, disarming the guard and rendering him unconscious before an alarm could be raised. "Proceed to the central shaft," he ordered. "We have minutes at most before they realize the reactor alert is false." They moved swiftly upward, encountering minimal resistance as most security personnel had responded to the fake emergency. When they reached level 42, however, they found the entrance to the control center heavily guarded, a full squad of Regulan elites who had not been fooled by the diversion. "Direct approach is suicide," Rivera observed as they took cover in an adjacent corridor. "We need another angle." Marlowe studied the layout of the level, noting a series of ventilation ducts that ran above the main corridor. "Same play as before?" he asked, glancing at Rivera. She nodded. "I can navigate those ducts. Place charges at key points to create multiple breaches simultaneously." "Do it," Marlowe decided. "The rest of us will prepare for immediate assault on your signal." As Rivera disappeared into the ventilation system, Marlowe positioned the remaining team members for maximum effect. Their numbers were small, but with the element of surprise, they might just succeed. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, with perfect synchronization, explosions ripped through 3 different sections of the control center perimeter. The Regulan guards rushed to respond to the multiple threats, creating the opening Marlowe had been waiting for. "Now!" he ordered, and the strike team surged forward, catching the disorganized defenders in a devastating crossfire. The battle for the control center was brief but brutal. The Regulan elites fought with the desperation of soldiers who expected no quarter, and Marlowe's team responded in kind. When the last defender fell, they had lost 3 more of their own, 2 humans and 1 Keltian. "Secure the perimeter," Marlowe ordered the survivors. "Dr. Tarek, get to work on those systems." Tarek moved immediately to the central terminal, connecting his interface and beginning the process of accessing Tower Beta's core functions. Rivera rejoined them, her armor scorched from a near miss, but otherwise unharmed. "Tower Beta Control Center secure," Marlowe reported through the comm to Cruz. "Proceeding with system override." "Acknowledged," Cruz responded, her voice stronger than before. The interceptors have broken off their search pattern. I think they're being recalled to Tower Gamma. They know what we're doing, Marlowe realized. How long until you can shut down this tower's systems, Doctor? 5 minutes for complete control, Tarek replied, without looking up from his work. But I can disable external communications immediately. Do it. We need to isolate Tower Gamma before they can reinforce. With a few commands, Tarek severed Tower Beta's connection to the wider Regulan network. Communications grid offline. Tower Gamma is now operating independently. Good work, Marlowe acknowledged. Now complete the shutdown sequence. Once this tower is neutralized, we move on Gamma. How? Rivera asked. We're down to 7 combat-effective personnel. Tower Gamma will be expecting us, and it houses the primary reactor for the entire defense grid. Marlowe had been considering this very problem. We can't approach directly. They'll have every approach covered, including the maintenance tunnels. There might be another way, Tarek said, looking up from his work. According to these schematics, Tower Gamma's reactor requires massive cooling systems. Those systems draw water from an underground aquifer through intake pipes large enough for a person to navigate. Underwater infiltration? Rivera looked skeptical. None of us have proper gear for that. We don't need to swim the entire distance, Tarek clarified. The maintenance access points along the pipeline would allow us to proceed in stages, mostly above water. It was a desperate plan, but no more desperate than their current situation. How long to neutralize this tower completely? Marlowe asked. 3 more minutes. Complete the shutdown. Then we move for the cooling system access point. True to his word, Tarek had Tower Beta's systems fully under control within minutes. The massive structure powered down around them, its defenses disabled, and its reactor transitioning to maintenance mode. With their objective accomplished, they made their way downward, following Tarek's directions to the cooling system access. They found it on the lowest level, a massive chamber housing pumps that circulated water through the tower's systems. At one end, a service hatch provided access to the main pipeline connecting to Tower Gamma. According to the schematics, it's about 5 kilometers to Gamma's intake point, Tarek explained. There should be maintenance platforms every 500 meters. Marlowe inspected the access hatch. Beyond it, he could see a wide tunnel with a walkway running alongside flowing water. The space was confined but navigable. We proceed in standard infiltration formation, he decided. Dr. Tarek in the center, combat personnel front and rear. They entered the pipeline system, the sound of rushing water echoing around them as they advanced along the narrow walkway. The air was damp and cool, a stark contrast to the arid heat of the planet's surface. Their progress was slow, but steady, each maintenance platform providing a brief respite before continuing onward. Halfway to their objective, Marlowe's comm unit activated, Cruz's voice coming through broken but intelligible. Lieutenant, Tower Gamma, massive energy buildup. Something's wrong. Repeat last transmission, Marlowe requested, but received only static in response. The water's structure is interfering with communications, Tarek explained. We won't have reliable contact until we're closer to Gamma. Or until we're back on the surface, Rivera added, voicing the concern they all shared. Marlowe considered their options. We continue as planned. Whatever's happening at Gamma, we need to reach it as quickly as possible. They pushed forward with renewed urgency, covering the remaining distance in half the expected time. The pipeline terminated in another pump chamber, this one actively circulating water into Tower Gamma's cooling systems. We're directly beneath the reactor core, Tarek informed them, consulting his interface. The control center is 30 levels up, accessible via maintenance shafts. Marlowe was about to issue orders when the entire structure around them shuddered violently. Dust and fragments of ceiling material rained down on them as the tremor subsided. What was that? Rivera asked, weapon raised instinctively. Some kind of impact, Marlowe guessed. Or an explosion. Tarek accessed a local terminal. The tower's systems are in chaos. Multiple breaches reported on upper levels. The reactor, it's being deliberately pushed toward critical failure. They're scuttling the tower, Marlowe realized with sudden clarity. Rather than let us capture it, they're going to destroy it and take a substantial portion of this continent with it. How long until critical failure? Rivera demanded. Tarek's expression was grim. Based on these readings, less than 20 minutes. Can we stop it from here? No. The override has to come from the main control center. Then we move now, Marlowe decided. Full tactical advance, no stealth, no hesitation. They ascended through the maintenance shafts as quickly as their exhausted bodies would allow, emerging onto level after level of abandoned stations. Whatever battle had taken place in the upper sections of the tower had drawn all defenders away from their position. When they finally reached the command level, they discovered why. The doors to the control center had been breached by explosive force, and beyond them lay a scene of carnage. Regulan defenders dead at their posts, and among them, the unmistakable armor of Hell's divers. Captain Cruz, Rivera breathed, rushing forward to check for survivors. They found her at the central terminal, bloodied but conscious, working the alien controls with desperate intensity. A handful of divers and coalition soldiers secured the perimeter, some wounded, but all combat-ready. Lieutenant, Cruz acknowledged without looking up from her work. Your timing is impeccable as always. What happened? Marlowe demanded, moving to her side. Changed the plan, she replied, echoing Rivera's earlier words. When we lost communication with you, I assumed the worst. Gathered everyone who could still fight and made a direct assault on Gamma. That was monumentally reckless, Marlowe observed, though there was no reproach in his tone. Worked, didn't it? Cruz grimaced as she continued inputting commands. But we've got a problem. The Regulans initiated a core overload sequence before we could secure the controls. I'm trying to abort it, but the system is fighting me. Dr. Tarek, Marlowe called, we need your expertise. The scientist hurried forward, connecting his interface to the terminal and immediately beginning to analyze the situation. The overload is too far advanced to stop completely, he reported after a moment. But I might be able to contain it. Channel the explosion upward rather than outward. What would that accomplish? Cruz asked. The tower would still be destroyed, but the blast radius would be limited to a few kilometers, rather than continent-wide devastation. Marlowe made the decision instantly. Do it. How long do we have to evacuate? If I can redirect the explosion. Tarek worked feverishly at the controls. Maybe 12 minutes, no more. All personnel, prepare for immediate evacuation, Marlowe ordered. Captain Cruz, can you move? She stood with visible effort, her earlier treatment having stabilized, but not healed her injuries. I can move. What's the extraction plan? The maintenance tunnels back to Tower Beta. We have transport waiting in the canyon beyond. Tarek looked up from his work, his expression grave. Someone needs to remain here to complete the containment sequence. The final stage requires manual authorization that can't be automated or remotely triggered. The implications of his words hung in the air between them. Someone would have to stay behind to ensure the reactor's energy was channeled upward. A one-way mission with no possibility of survival. I'll stay, Cruz stated, her voice leaving no room for debate. Unacceptable, Marlowe countered immediately. You're injured and the ranking officer. Your duty is to get these people to safety. This was my mission from the start, Lieutenant. And now it's mine. Marlowe turned to Tarek. Show me what needs to be done. The scientist hesitated, then quickly explained the sequence of commands that would need to be executed in the final moments before detonation. It was complex but manageable. A series of overrides that would channel the reactor's energy upward through the tower's structure, rather than allowing it to explode outward. Lieutenant Kane, Cruz began, but Marlowe cut her off. This isn't negotiable. Captain, get our people out. Complete the mission. That's an order. For a moment, it seemed Cruz might argue further. But then, her expression shifted to one of solemn understanding. She reached out, clasping Marlowe's forearm in the same warrior's gesture he had offered her during their descent to the planet's surface. A lifetime ago, it seemed now. "It has been an honor, Lieutenant," she said simply. "The honor was mine. Captain, now go, before I change my mind." Cruz gathered the survivors, Rivera, Tarek, and the remaining divers and coalition soldiers. At the entrance to the control center, she paused for a final look back. "Defiance beyond the grave, Lieutenant," she called. "Defiance beyond the grave," Marlowe echoed, the human phrase feeling right on his lips. And then, they were gone, leaving him alone in the control center with the countdown to destruction ticking inexorably downward. Marlowe moved to the central terminal, reviewing the sequence Tarek had shown him. The process was elegantly simple in concept, a series of commands that would redirect the reactor's containment fields to channel the explosion upward, like a focused beam of energy, rather than allowing it to expand in all directions. He began the sequence, each command bringing him one step closer to the moment when there would be no turning back. Outside the viewports, he could see the sky of Aegis 9, tinged red from the dust that perpetually hung in the atmosphere. It wasn't his homeworld, but in this moment, it felt like a place worth dying for. The terminal beeped, indicating that the final sequence required manual authorization. Marlowe placed his hand on the scanner, his silver-flecked skin contrasting with the dark metal of the Regulan technology. "Authorization accepted," announced the system in its mechanical voice. "Final containment protocol initiated. Core detonation in 2 minutes." Marlowe stepped back from the terminal, his duty fulfilled. He moved to the viewport, gazing out at the scarred landscape below. Somewhere out there, Cruz and the others would be making their way to safety, carrying with them the success of a mission that had seemed impossible only days ago. He found himself thinking of Viridian Prime, of the losses that had haunted him for so long. There was a symmetry here that brought an unexpected peace, his life in exchange for countless others, just as the humans had demonstrated time and again. The structure around him began to vibrate as the reactor's energy built toward critical mass. Displays throughout the control center flickered and died, leaving only the viewport to illuminate the space with the ruddy light of Aegis 9's dying day. In his final moments, Lieutenant Marlowe Kane, once skeptical of human methods and motives, found himself embracing their most fundamental quality, the willingness to sacrifice everything for something greater than oneself. The light grew brighter, the vibration more intense. And then, in a blinding flash that reached toward the stars, Tower Gamma ceased to exist, its destruction channeled upward in a pillar of energy, visible across half the continent. Captain Evangeline Cruz stood on the observation deck of the USS Valor, gazing down at the planet below. The scars of battle were still visible, but now they were interspersed with the first signs of recovery. Coalition transport ships ferrying civilians to safety, temporary settlements rising from the ruins, the beginning of healing. "The last evacuation transports are away," reported Dr. Simon Tarek, joining her at the viewport. "Over 80,000 civilians rescued, with more being found each day." "And the casualties?" Cruz asked, though she already knew the answer. "High," Tarek admitted. "Nearly 40% of coalition forces committed to the operation. But without Lieutenant Kane's actions, it would have been total." Cruz nodded, her expression solemn. The memory of their final exchange in Tower Gamma's control center remained vivid in her mind. The determination in his eyes, the acceptance of what must be done. "The Coalition Council has recommended him for their highest honor," Tarek continued, the first non-Keltian to receive it. "He wouldn't care about the honor," Cruz said. "He cared about the mission." "And the people," Tarek added. "He changed in those final days, we all did." Beyond the viewport, the landscape of Aegis 9 continued its slow rotation. Where Tower Gamma had once stood, there was now only a circular crater. The Earth fused to glass by the channeled force of the explosion. Towers Alpha and Beta had been dismantled, their components repurposed for the evacuation effort. Major Rotek has been requesting to speak with you, Tarek said, after a moment of silence. He's overseeing the integration of Hell's diver tactics into Coalition doctrine. Cruz raised an eyebrow. The same Major Rotek who called us reckless and irresponsible. The very same. People change when faced with undeniable truth. And what truth is that, Doctor? Tarek gestured toward the planet below. That defiance, true defiance, transcends cultural boundaries. It echoes beyond the grave. Cruz smiled faintly, recognizing her own words given back to her with new meaning. Have the Major meet me in Briefing Room Alpha. We have work to do. As Tarek departed, Cruz remained at the viewport a moment longer. In the reflection of the transparent alloy, she thought she could see the ghostly outline of Marlowe's features, silver-flecked skin catching the starlight. Defiance beyond the grave. Lieutenant, she whispered, we'll make it count. Years later, an aging Evangeline Cruz sat on the porch of her home on Earth, watching her granddaughter play in the garden below. The child was constructing an elaborate fort from fallen branches, her face set with the determination that Cruz recognized all too well. Grandma, the girl called, tell me the story again. The one about the silver man who saved everyone. Cruz smiled, easing herself from her chair and making her way down to the garden. Around her neck hung a small crystal pendant, one of 12 such stars that had been crafted from the fused glass of Tower Gamma's crater. A memorial known throughout the Coalition as Hell's Beacon. It's not just about one man, she corrected gently, sitting beside her granddaughter in the shade of an ancient oak. It's about all of us, and what we can accomplish when we stand together. But the Silver Man was the hero, the child insisted. In a way, Cruz conceded. But the real hero was the idea he came to embody, that some things are worth any sacrifice, and that true courage never dies. Tell it from the beginning, the girl urged, settling against her grandmother's side with the contentment of one who knows a beloved tale is about to unfold. Cruz touched the crystal pendant, feeling its warmth against her skin. It began in orbit above a war-torn planet called Aegis 9, she started, her voice taking on the cadence of a practiced storyteller. The USS Valor was preparing for an assault, and a lieutenant named Marlowe Kane was about to learn what it truly meant to be a Hell's diver. As the story unfolded once more, somewhere in the vastness of space, 12 crystalline stars hung in orbit above a healing world, a monument to sacrifice, to cooperation across the boundaries of species and culture, and to the undying truth that defiance, true defiance, echoes beyond the grave.